Hello there, and welcome to Midnight Geography. Tonight we'll drift into the overlooked contours of New Jersey. New Jersey is a peninsula that forgot it was one, where ancient mountains dissolve into Atlantic sands. It's a geography of contradictions, where the densest populations in America brush against untouched pine forests, where colonial shores meet primordial ridges. This small state holds more geological epochs than regions 10 times its size. If you enjoy these peaceful geographical explorations, consider liking and subscribing. It helps other curious minds find their way here too. But for now, let's begin. The Pine Barrens of southern New Jersey contain over 1 million acres of forest, sitting atop an aquifer holding 17 trillion gallons of some of the purest water in America. This is enough water to cover the entire state in 10 feet of crystalline liquid. The trees above grow in sugar sand so nutrient poor that only the hardiest pines can survive, their roots reaching down toward water that has been filtering through sand for thousands of years. The aquifer beneath is a lens of liquid so clean that it requires almost no treatment before drinking. Strange to think that beneath one of America's most mysterious forests lies enough water to supply the entire East Coast for decades. The Lenape people called this region the place of the dragon, perhaps sensing something profound in the way morning mist rises from dark cedar waters, or how the forest seems to breathe with its own ancient rhythm. In the winter of 1985, Jockey Hollow near Morristown recorded the coldest temperature in New Jersey history, minus 34 degrees Fahrenheit. That same night, parts of Alaska were warmer. The hollow earned its name from the Continental Army's horses that wintered there during the Revolution. Though the cold that Washington's troops endured in 1780 was nothing compared to this modern record. The geography of Jockey Hollow creates a perfect cold trap, where dense Arctic air sinks and pools in the valley, unable to escape. On still winter nights, the temperature can be 20 degrees colder at the bottom of the hollow than on the ridges just above. The Delaware Water Gap cuts through the Kittatinny Ridge, with walls rising 1,400 feet above the river. This magnificent gorge was carved when an ancient glacial lake burst through the mountain barrier 15,000 years ago. Imagine the moment when that natural dam failed, millions of years of mountain resistance suddenly giving way to water's patient persistence. The rocks exposed in the gap tell a story that began 400 million years ago, when these mountains stood as tall as today's Himalayas. Layer by layer, the gap reveals Earth's autobiography written in stone. The Lenape believed this was where the world began, and standing at the base of these cliffs, watching the river continue its eternal sculpture, it's easy to understand why. The morning mist that rises from the Delaware often fills the gap completely, making the river appear to flow through clouds. Cape May sits farther south than Washington, D.C., making it the southernmost point in New Jersey. This geographic surprise means that New Jersey's famous shore town is actually closer to the Mason-Dixon line than to the state's northern border. The positioning creates a microclimate where southern plants thrive far north of their usual range. Magnolias bloom here weeks before they flower in nearby Philadelphia. The continental shelf extends far out to sea from Cape May Point, creating upwellings that bring deep ocean water to the surface, making these waters some of the richest fishing grounds on the Atlantic coast. Victorian houses here face south toward waters that remember the Chesapeake more than the Hudson. The Palisades cliffs along the Hudson River are made of diabase rock that cooled underground 200 million years ago. This was the same geological event that created similar formations in Morocco when the continents were joined as one. The cliffs rise like a wall of ancient memory, their columnar joints resembling massive organ pipes. When the magma that formed them cooled, it contracted and cracked in hexagonal patterns, creating the vertical columns that gave the Palisades their name. From across the river, they appear as a fortress built by geological forces, defending New Jersey from the east. The rock here is so hard that attempts to quarry it in the 1800s often ended in broken equipment and bankruptcy. Nature had built something that human industry could barely scratch. Patterson's Great Falls drops 77 feet, making it the second largest waterfall by volume east of the Mississippi River after Niagara Falls. Alexander Hamilton stood here in 1778 and saw America's industrial future in the falling water. The Passaic River gathers strength for miles before plunging over ancient basalt, the same volcanic rock that forms the Watchung Mountains. The sound of the falls can be heard a mile away on quiet mornings, a constant thunder that Native Americans considered the voice of the Great Spirit. During spring floods, the volume of water can rival small Niagara, sending mist hundreds of feet into the air. The falls have been falling for 13,000 years, since the last glaciers retreated, wearing the rock face back inch by inch, century by century. Round Valley Reservoir near Clinton reaches depths of 180 feet, making it so deep and cold that it supports a population of lake trout typically found in Canadian waters. The reservoir was created by damming a natural valley, but the depth comes from the valley's unusual geology, a syncline where the Earth's crust folded downward millions of years ago. The water stays so cold at depth that it never fully mixes, creating distinct layers like an aquatic layer cake. Swimmers report encountering walls of cold water that take their breath away, thermoclines where summer never penetrates. On winter nights, the reservoir sometimes doesn't freeze despite sub-freezing air temperatures, the deep water's thermal mass refusing to surrender its heat. Local legends speak of things in the deep that sonar cannot explain, shadows that move against the current in water too cold for most life. New Jersey contains 130 miles of Atlantic coastline, but when measuring all the tidal waters including bays and rivers, the state has over 1,800 miles of shoreline. This mathematical magic happens because coastlines are fractals. The closer you look, the more detail you find. Every inlet multiplies the shore. Every bay adds its circumference to the total. The barrier islands alone contribute hundreds of miles of bayside shoreline that most people never see, hidden behind the ocean beaches. These back bays are where the real life happens: nurseries for fish, feeding grounds for migrating birds, and meadows of Spartina grass that turn gold in autumn light. High Point Monument stands at 1,803 feet above sea level, the highest elevation in New Jersey. From this pinnacle, you can see 3 states spreading below like a rumpled quilt of forests and fields. The monument itself rises another 220 feet, built of local granite and limestone to honor New Jersey's war veterans. On clear days, the view extends 50 miles in every direction, to the Catskill Mountains in New York, the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania, and across the rolling hills of New Jersey's Skylands region. The elevation creates its own weather, often shrouded in clouds when the valleys below bask in sunshine. Trees here are often covered in rime ice in winter, transformed into crystal sculptures by freezing fog. The Watchung Mountains are actually 3 parallel ridges of volcanic basalt that erupted when North America separated from Africa. These ridges run like giant steps across northern New Jersey, each one marking a separate lava flow from 200 million years ago. The Lenape called them the High Hills, and George Washington used them as a natural fortress during the Revolutionary War. The British could never fully penetrate these volcanic ramparts. Between the ridges lie fertile valleys where the Passaic River meanders in great loops, taking 90 miles to travel what a crow could fly in 20. The basalt here contains crystals of zeolite that formed in gas bubbles as the lava cooled, tiny gems hidden in the hard black rock. Barnegat Bay stretches 42 miles as a shallow estuary with average depths of only 4 feet. This shallow water warms quickly in summer and cools rapidly in winter, creating one of the most productive marine nurseries on the Atlantic coast. The bay is really a lagoon, protected from the ocean by a string of barrier islands with only 3 inlets allowing ocean water to enter. Eelgrass meadows wave beneath the surface like underwater prairies, providing habitat for seahorses. Yes, seahorses in New Jersey. The shallow water means that winds can quickly turn the bay from mirror smooth to dangerously choppy, a transformation that has caught countless boaters by surprise. The New Jersey Meadowlands contain 8,400 acres of wetlands, just 7 miles from Manhattan. Here, 285 species of birds have been documented in what was once dismissed as wasteland. The Meadowlands are where glacial Lake Hackensack drained 10,000 years ago, leaving behind a vast marsh that refused to be fully tamed. Beneath the sediments lie the remains of cedar forests from when sea levels were lower, their wood still intact after millennia of preservation in the airless mud. Peregrine falcons nest on the bridges above, while muskrats build lodges in the reeds below, a wilderness persisting in the shadow of the world's greatest city. Lake Hopatcong covers 4 square miles as New Jersey's largest freshwater body, originally 9 smaller ponds that were dammed together in the 1820s to feed the Morris Canal. The canal needed a reliable water source at its highest point, so engineers combined natural ponds into one great reservoir. Today, the lake's shoreline stretches for 45 miles, creating countless coves and points where morning mist gathers. The original ponds can still be traced in the lake's unusual shape, a body of water that looks like spilled mercury on a map. Ice fishing shacks appear each winter like a temporary village on the frozen surface, continuing traditions that predate the lake itself. The Atlantic City coastline has moved inland over 2,000 feet since the 1800s. Some beaches lose 10 feet per year to erosion and rising seas. The original lighthouse, built in 1857, once stood on firm ground, but would now be hundreds of feet out to sea if it hadn't been moved. Whole neighborhoods that existed in the 1920s are now beneath the waves. The city fights back with beach replenishment, pumping sand from offshore to rebuild what waves carry away. An endless battle between human ambition and oceanic persistence. Underneath the famous boardwalk, the original beach level from the 1800s still exists, buried beneath fill brought in to raise the city above storm surges. Sunfish Pond sits at 1,379 feet elevation along the Kittatinny Ridge, a glacial lake so perfectly circular it appears artificial. Yet this perfect circle was carved naturally by glacial ice 15,000 years ago. The pond has no inlet or outlet streams, fed only by springs and rain, making it one of the purest bodies of water in the state. The Appalachian Trail passes along its eastern shore, and thousands of hikers pause here each year, drawn by something ineffable in its perfect geometry. In autumn, the surrounding forest reflects in the still water, creating a double world of color. The pond never fully warms even in summer, maintaining temperatures that recall its glacial birth. The Morris River in Cumberland County is the longest river entirely within New Jersey at 50 miles. Despite being designated a national scenic river, it remains largely unknown outside the region. The river flows through some of the last wilderness in the state, past stands of Atlantic white cedar and through wild rice marshes where Native Americans once harvested. Bald eagles nest along its shores, and in spring, the river runs backward during extreme high tides, confusing canoeists who find themselves paddling against a current flowing upstream. The Maurice carries less sediment than almost any other river on the Atlantic coast, its waters running clear even after heavy rains. Island Beach State Park preserves one of the last undeveloped barrier beaches on the Atlantic coast. Here, maritime forests grow on 40-foot dunes, just as they did centuries ago. The dunes march slowly westward, grain by grain, burying forests that then become ghost forests on the bayside. You can find cedar stumps on the beach that grew when the island was a half-mile east of its current position. The primary dunes face the constant assault of ocean winds, held in place only by the deep roots of beach grass. Behind them, the secondary dunes support thickets of beach plum and bayberry, then maritime forest of holly, sassafras, and oak, all sculpted by salt wind into fantastic shapes. The Ramapo fault line runs through northern New Jersey for 70 miles, occasionally producing minor earthquakes from rocks that are over 1 billion years old. This ancient fault marks where continents collided and separated multiple times over Earth's history. The fault is visible in road cuts along Route 287, where dark Precambrian rock meets lighter Paleozoic stone in a clear line of geological discord. Small earthquakes rattle the region every few years, reminders that these old mountains are not quite done moving. The Ramapo Mountains above the fault contain some of the oldest exposed rock in North America, crystalline basement rocks that formed when life on Earth was still single-celled. Brigantine Island, north of Atlantic City, contains 20,000 acres of salt marsh that floods twice daily. This landscape transforms completely every 6 hours, shifting from vast meadows of grass to a silvered expanse of water. The tides here follow ancient channels called creeks, though they bear no resemblance to freshwater streams. These tidal creeks meander in patterns that look chaotic from ground level, but reveal perfect mathematical harmony from above. Fiddler crabs emerge in millions at low tide, their claws clicking in a sound like distant rain. Great blue herons stand motionless for hours, waiting for the tide to deliver their meals. The marsh grass here filters pollutants from the water so effectively that the outgoing tide is cleaner than the incoming. The Sparta Mountain Wildlife Management Area contains magnetic rock formations that cause compass needles to spin wildly. This phenomenon comes from magnetite deposits in ancient metamorphic stone, concentrated enough to create local magnetic fields stronger than Earth's. These rocks formed deep in the planet's crust when iron minerals aligned with ancient magnetic fields, preserving a record of Earth's magnetic pole reversals over millions of years. Hikers report feelings of disorientation in certain areas, though whether this is from magnetic effects or simple suggestion remains debated. The rocks here glow purple under ultraviolet light, revealing hidden minerals that only darkness can show. Sandy Hook Peninsula extends 6 miles into lower New York Bay, growing northward by 60 feet each year from sand deposits carried by longshore currents. This sandy finger slowly reaches toward Staten Island, like a geological hand extended in greeting across the water. The Hook is one of the few places on the Atlantic coast that grows rather than erodes, a beneficiary of sand stolen from beaches to the south. The oldest lighthouse in the United States still operates here, though when it was built in 1764, it stood 500 feet from the tip of the Hook. Now it sits more than a mile inland, surrounded by sand that didn't exist when the lighthouse keeper first climbed its stairs. Maritime holly forests grow in the shelter of the dunes, some trees over 300 years old, their trunks twisted into serpentine shapes by centuries of salt wind. The peninsula acts as a natural breakwater for New York Harbor, absorbing storm waves that would otherwise surge up the Hudson. During spring and fall migrations, the narrow spit becomes a highway for monarch butterflies, flowing north and south in orange rivers that shimmer against the blue water. The Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge near Chatham sits in a basin that was once a glacial lake 20 miles long and 10 miles wide. When the Wisconsin Glacier retreated 13,000 years ago, it left behind a massive meltwater lake trapped between the Watchung Ridges and the terminal moraine. For thousands of years, this Lake Passaic covered much of northern New Jersey until it finally found an outlet and drained, leaving behind the Great Swamp. The peat beneath the swamp is 40 feet deep in places, accumulated organic matter from 12,000 years of growth and decay. Wood ducks nest in hollow trees that stand in water stained the color of coffee by tannins from decomposing leaves. In winter, the swamp becomes a different world, the standing water frozen into sheets of black ice that boom and crack with temperature changes. The Lenape people called this place the Big Piece of Ground and considered it sacred, a place where the spirit world touched the earth. Even now, walking the boardwalks at dawn when mist rises from the dark water, it's easy to understand why. Wharton State Forest encompasses 115,000 acres, making it larger than many entire counties in New Jersey. Rivers here flow the color of tea, stained by tannins from Atlantic white cedar roots. The Batstow River winds through the forest like a ribbon of amber glass, its water so pure and acidic that iron barely dissolves in it, yet so dark that the bottom disappears just inches below the surface. These pine-barren rivers run backward from most people's expectations. Dark but clean, acidic but full of life. The forest contains ghost towns from the bog iron era, when furnaces here produced cannonballs and camp kettles from iron that precipitated out of the acidic water. Wandering through Wharton on misty mornings, you might stumble upon stone foundations in the woods, remnants of towns that thrived and died before the Civil War. The forest recovers everything eventually, sending pine seedlings up through floorboards, reclaiming roads with moss and fern. The Hudson Canyon begins just off the shore of New Jersey and cuts 400 miles into the continental shelf, reaching depths greater than the Grand Canyon. This submarine gorge starts near the mouth of the Hudson River and descends through the darkness to depths of 3 miles below sea level. The canyon was carved when sea levels were lower and the Hudson River extended far beyond its current mouth, cutting down through sediments over millions of years. Giant squid hunt in these depths, pursued by sperm whales that dive from the surface in breath-holding journeys that last an hour. The walls of the canyon create upwellings that bring nutrients from the deep, supporting a food chain that extends from microscopic plankton to great white sharks. Fishing boats work the canyon edges where the depth changes abruptly, finding tuna and swordfish that follow the warm Gulf Stream waters along the canyon's rim. Triple Divide Point near High Point State Park sends water to 3 different watersheds. A raindrop falling here might flow to the Delaware River and reach the Atlantic at Delaware Bay, to the Hudson River and enter the ocean at New York Harbor, or to the Susquehanna River and travel all the way to the Chesapeake Bay. This humble spot in the woods marks one of nature's great sorting points, where water begins journeys that will take it hundreds of miles in different directions. The point itself is unremarkable, a gentle rise in the forest floor where 3 slight slopes meet. Yet this spot connects New Jersey to vast watersheds that drain much of the northeastern United States. Standing here on a rainy day, watching water flow away in 3 directions, you witness the beginning of rivers, the first tentative steps of water that will join streams, then creeks, then mighty rivers on its journey to the sea. The Cohansey Aquifer beneath South Jersey holds 17 trillion gallons of water in sand deposited when the area was a seabed 12 million years ago. This ancient ocean left behind layers of sand and gravel that now hold water as pure as any on Earth. The aquifer extends beneath the pine barrens like an underground sea, its water moving incredibly slowly through the sand, taking centuries to travel from where rain enters to where springs emerge. Cedar Creek, water that bubbles up in streams today, might have fallen as rain when the Lenape still had these forests to themselves. The sand filters the water so effectively that it emerges virtually sterile, too pure to conduct electricity efficiently, too clean to support much algae growth. This explains why Pine Barrens streams run clear even after heavy rains, why the lakes have sandy bottoms visible at 10 feet deep. Paulin's Kill Valley stretches 42 miles through northwestern New Jersey, carved by glacial meltwater that was once a raging torrent 300 feet deep. When the ice dams holding back glacial lakes failed, the water rushed through here with force beyond imagining, cutting through solid rock in catastrophic floods that lasted days. The valley walls still show the scour marks from boulders that tumbled in that ancient flood, scratches in the bedrock that tell of violence from a gentler epoch. Today, the Paulin's Kill meanders quietly through the valley it didn't carve, a stream too small for its valley, what geologists call an underfit river. The old lake terraces remain visible on the valley walls, horizontal lines marking where water stood for centuries before finding a lower outlet. In the quiet pools of the modern stream, brook trout rise to mayflies in the evening, their circles spreading across water that once raged with the power to move mountains. Cape Henlopen across from Cape May has moved 2.5 miles north in 200 years, showing how Delaware Bay's mouth constantly reshapes itself through sand migration. The cape that Captain Henry Hudson saw in 1609 no longer exists, rebuilt grain by grain in a new location. Lighthouses built on solid ground now stand in water or have been moved multiple times to escape the sea. The sand here travels on conveyor currents, picked up from eroding shores to the south and deposited as the cape builds northward. This movement has closed inlets, created new ones, turned islands into peninsulas and peninsulas into islands. Maps from different centuries show completely different coastlines, as if depicting different planets. The Cape is really a river of sand flowing slowly north, a geological process visible in human timescales. The Hackensack River runs 45 miles through the most densely populated part of America, yet still supports spawning runs of shad and herring each spring. These fish navigate through urban waters that once ran pure, past Superfund sites and sewage plants, following ancient instincts older than the cities that surround them. The river remembers what it was before the factories and highways, and the fish remember too, returning each spring to waters their ancestors have sought for thousands of years. In the upper reaches, the river still runs clear over gravel beds where Native Americans once built fish weirs. Bald eagles have returned to nest along its shores, fishing where Manhattan's skyline pierces the horizon. The meadowlands it drains were once considered wasteland, but the river knew better, maintaining its seasonal rhythms through centuries of human interference. Tillman Ravine in Stokes State Forest cuts through rock so ancient it predates complex life on Earth. The boulders that choke the ravine tumbled into place when mastodons still roamed New Jersey, when the last glaciers were retreating north. The stream drops 140 feet in half a mile, tumbling over waterfalls and through pools carved in stone that formed before the first fish evolved. The rock here is over 400 million years old, laid down when New Jersey was covered by shallow seas. Walking up the ravine is like traveling backward through time, each waterfall marking millions of years, each pool a chapter in Earth's biography. Hemlocks that shade the ravine grow from cracks in the rock, their roots prying apart stone with patient persistence. Allaire State Park's bog iron deposits colored streams orange for centuries, the rust-red water marking places where iron precipitates from the acidic Pine Barrens water. This iron formed in wetlands where bacteria concentrate dissolved iron into nodules that can be harvested and smelted. The furnace at Allaire produced cannonballs for the Revolutionary War, then cookware and stoves for a growing nation, all from iron that literally bubbled up from the ground. The process that creates bog iron continues today. You can see the orange flocculant forming in streams, iron oxide precipitating before your eyes. The abandoned furnace stands in the forest like a pyramid from a lost civilization, its stone stack that once roared with fire, now home to ferns and owls. The village around it disappeared back into forest, but the iron-stained streams flow on, still painting the water orange. The Salem River allows ocean tides to penetrate 30 miles inland, making Salem City a seaport despite being that far from the Atlantic. Twice daily, the tide reverses the river's flow, salt water pushing upstream against fresh water in a mixing zone that moves back and forth with the moon's pull. Ships once sailed up the Salem to the city's wharves, though they had to know the tides or risk grounding on mudflats that appeared and disappeared every 6 hours. The tidal reach creates a long estuary where salt marsh plants grow far inland, where blue crabs scuttle in water that's barely salty. The river changes personality completely between tide cycles, running swift and muddy toward the bay, then slow and clear as ocean water pushes inland. Ghost Lake in Jenny Jump State Forest appears and disappears based on rainfall, sometimes holding 10 feet of water, other times completely dry grassland. This ephemeral lake fills a natural depression in limestone bedrock, but the limestone is fractured, allowing water to drain through underground channels when the water table drops. After heavy rains, the lake fills in days, reflecting the sky and forest as if it had always been there. In drought, it vanishes just as quickly, leaving only dried mud and grass where canoes floated weeks before. Local legends say the lake appears to warn of coming disasters, though the geology suggests a more prosaic explanation. Still, there's something unsettling about walking across dry ground where you swam the summer before, or finding a lake where last week was forest floor. The Manasquan Inlet was cut through the barrier beach by hand in 1931, creating a permanent opening that changed the ecology of miles of coastline. Before the inlet, the Manasquan River reached the sea miles away, and Point Pleasant's beaches were unbroken barrier island. Local fishermen dynamited through the dunes during a storm, then worked with shovels to keep the new inlet open until the state took over. The inlet transformed Point Pleasant into a fishing port, allowing boats direct ocean access, but it also interrupted the natural flow of sand along the coast. Beaches to the south began starving of sand, while those to the north grew. The inlet created new habitat for species that need the mixing of salt and fresh water, but destroyed habitat for others that required the protected bay waters. Mount Tammany rises 1,527 feet at the Delaware Water Gap, named for a Lenape chief and composed of sandstone laid down when New Jersey was near the equator. The mountain is built from sand that accumulated in rivers and deltas 400 million years ago, when the first plants were just beginning to colonize land. The rock layers tilt at angles that show how the mountain was pushed up and folded during continental collisions. From the summit, the Delaware River looks like a silver snake far below, still cutting deeper into the gap it carved. The trail to the top follows the same route the Lenape used for vision quests, where young people would fast and wait for dreams that would guide their lives. Red-tailed hawks ride thermals up the mountain face, climbing invisible spirals of rising air. The Mullica River drains 1/3 of the pinelands despite being only 50 miles long. Its water runs so pure and acidic, it preserves wooden ships for centuries, the cedar-stained water acting like natural embalming fluid. Shipwrecks from the Revolution lie preserved in the river mud, their wood still sound after 2 centuries underwater. The river's watershed includes some of the largest wilderness areas in New Jersey, places where you can paddle for hours without seeing a building or hearing a car. The water runs the color of strong tea, but is cleaner than most mountain streams, its acidity preventing bacterial growth. Atlantic white cedars along the banks eventually fall into the water, where they can lie preserved for thousands of years, creating underwater forests of fallen giants. Greenwood Lake straddles the New York-New Jersey border for 7 miles, occupying a valley scoured by glaciers between 2 ancient mountain ridges. The lake formed when retreating ice left a moraine that dammed the valley, creating a body of water that reflects 2 states in its surface. The state line runs down the middle of the lake, invisible but legally real, meaning you can fish New York waters from a New Jersey shore. The lake freezes most winters, and ice fishing shanties appear like a temporary international village. New York and New Jersey licenses required depending on which side of the invisible line you drill your hole. The surrounding mountains funnel weather down the lake, creating winds that can transform calm water into whitecaps in minutes. The Highlands region contains rocks 1.3 billion years old, some of the oldest exposed bedrock in North America. These rocks formed when the Earth was young, before complex life existed, before the continents had taken their current shapes. The rocks have been through multiple mountain building events, heated and squeezed and reformed so many times that their original nature is almost unrecognizable. They predate the Atlantic Ocean by 1 billion years, formed when the planet's geography was unrecognizable. Iron deposits in these ancient rocks drew miners for centuries, leaving behind shafts that penetrate deep into stone that formed when Earth's atmosphere had no oxygen. Some of the mines flooded when abandoned, creating underground lakes of impossibly blue water, colored by dissolved minerals from the billion-year-old rock. Cheesequake State Park sits at the exact transition zone between North Jersey's Piedmont and South Jersey's coastal plain, a meeting place of 2 different worlds. The park's name comes from the Lenape word Cheeseoke, meaning upland, and within its boundaries, you can walk from pine barrens to hardwood forest in minutes. The transition is visible in everything. The soil changes from sand to clay. The trees shift from pine to oak. Even the birds are different on either side of the divide. This ecological boundary has existed for millions of years, marking where ancient mountains meet the coastal sediments. Standing at the transition, you can have 1 foot in the mountains and 1 in the coastal plain, straddling 2 geological provinces. The Musconetcong River drops 750 feet over its 45-mile course, the steepest gradient of any river in New Jersey. This dramatic descent powered dozens of mills in the 1800s, their ruins still visible along the riverbanks like monuments to water power. The river falls so steeply that it creates a nearly continuous series of rapids and riffles, perfect habitat for trout and smallmouth bass. In spring, the river runs high and fast, carrying snowmelt from the highlands to the Delaware River in a rush of white water. Mill dams still interrupt the flow in places, creating deep pools where the water pauses before tumbling over the spillway to continue its hurried descent to the Delaware. Deal Lake in Monmouth County is technically a tidal pond that was once a freshwater lake before the construction of a floodgate system connected it to the ocean. This transformation happened gradually as human engineering slowly allowed salt water to creep into what had been a purely freshwater ecosystem. The lake still remembers its freshwater past. Spring rains can temporarily push the salt back toward the ocean, creating layers of different salinity that fish navigate like underwater weather fronts. Snapping turtles that lived here when it was fresh water learned to tolerate the salt, adapting to their changing world rather than leaving. The floodgates open and close with the tides, breathing salt and fresh water in a rhythm that creates one of the most biologically diverse water bodies on the Jersey Shore. Herons stand in the shallows where the two waters meet, fishing the mixing zone where confused baitfish gather. In winter, when ice forms, it creates strange patterns, freshwater freezing at different temperatures than salt, making a patchwork of ice and open water. The Franklin mine produced over 300 different minerals, more than almost any other location on Earth, with 25 minerals found nowhere else in the world. Under ultraviolet light, the mine walls glow in fluorescent greens, oranges, and reds, a hidden rainbow revealed only in darkness. The zinc ores here formed in conditions so unique they've never been replicated elsewhere on the planet. A perfect storm of chemistry and geology that occurred just once in Earth's history. Franklinite, named for the town, exists nowhere else, a mineral so unusual that scientists still debate how it formed. The mine tunnels extend for miles underground, following ore veins through rock that glows and flickers under black light like an alien landscape. Collectors have been gathering specimens here for 2 centuries, yet new minerals are still being discovered, microscopic crystals hiding in the zinc ore. The underground workings maintain a constant 56-degree temperature year-round, a refuge from summer heat and winter cold. Raccoon Creek in Gloucester County flows northwest, opposite most New Jersey streams, following an ancient river valley that predates current topography. This rebellious waterway ignores the general rule that Jersey rivers flow toward the Atlantic, instead heading inland toward the Delaware River. The creek follows the bed of an ancestral river that flowed here millions of years ago when the landscape tilted differently. Fossils in the creek banks tell of a time when this was a tropical shoreline, with shark teeth and mollusk shells embedded in the clay. The backward flow confuses migrating fish, who sometimes swim up Raccoon Creek thinking they're heading out to sea, only to find themselves moving deeper inland. The creek maintains its ancient course despite everything humans have done to the landscape around it, a river flowing through time as much as space. The Bergen-Passaic Aquifer System lies beneath the most densely populated area of New Jersey, yet still provides drinking water for over 1 million people. This hidden resource flows through rock fractures beneath highways, shopping malls, and suburban lawns, somehow maintaining its purity despite the urban landscape above. The aquifer exists in the spaces between rock layers, in cracks opened by ancient earthquakes, in voids dissolved by groundwater over millions of years. Wells drilled into this aquifer can produce thousands of gallons per minute, water that fell as rain decades or centuries ago, filtered through stone older than dinosaurs. The water moves through the rock so slowly that contamination in one spot might not show up in wells a mile away for 50 years, a delayed reaction that makes protection crucial. Bear Swamp near Delaware Bay is actually higher in elevation than the surrounding area, a reverse wetland caused by clay layers that trap rainwater above the water table. This perched wetland defies gravity, holding water on a hill while valleys below run dry. The clay lens beneath acts like a bathtub, keeping water from draining down through the soil. Trees here have adapted to having wet feet on high ground, their roots spreading horizontally rather than diving deep. In drought years, Bear Swamp remains wet while lower wetlands dry up, becoming an oasis for wildlife when water elsewhere disappears. The swamp creates its own microclimate, cooler in summer and warmer in winter than the surrounding uplands. Rare orchids grow here that exist nowhere else in New Jersey, adapted to this unusual combination of elevation and saturation. Long Beach Island has migrated westward over 2,000 feet since the 1840s, literally rolling over itself as storms push sand from ocean to bayside. Houses built on the ocean side in the 1900s now lie underwater on the bayside, the island having migrated right over them. This process, called Barrier Island rollover, is how these islands survive rising seas, by retreating rather than resisting. Each major storm picks up sand from the ocean beach and deposits it in the back bay, moving the island incrementally westward. Old-timers can point to spots in the bay where they played on the beach as children, now covered by 6 feet of water. The island's migration leaves a trail of evidence: maritime forest stumps on the ocean beach, exposed as the island rolls back over what was once its bayside. The Wallkill River is one of the few rivers in the United States that flows northward, running from New Jersey into New York State against intuitive geography. Most people assume water flows south, but the Wallkill follows the slope of the land regardless of compass direction. The river drains the ancient lake bed of Glacial Lake Wallkill, flowing through black dirt regions where the soil is actually decomposed vegetation from the lake bottom. This soil is so rich that onions grown here develop exceptional sweetness, the black dirt producing some of the finest crops in the Northeast. The river meanders through broad valleys it didn't carve, another underfit stream occupying a valley created by much larger flows during Ice Age floods. Muskrats build lodges in the slow-moving water, and great blue herons fish in oxbow lakes left behind when the river changed course. Clinton Road in West Milford runs through 10 miles of undeveloped forest, the longest stretch of wilderness road in the most densely populated state. The road follows an old iron mine route, passing ruins of furnaces and workers' villages reclaimed by forest. At night, the road becomes a tunnel through darkness, trees pressing in from both sides, no lights visible for miles. The pavement follows the contours of the land rather than cutting through, rising and falling with every ridge and valley. Beaver dams flood sections during wet years, and bears regularly cross between the wilderness areas on either side. The road passes Clinton Reservoir, whose dam created a lake that drowned the village of Clinton Furnace, its buildings still visible underwater when levels drop during drought. The Navesink Highlands rise 260 feet directly from sea level, the highest natural elevation on the Atlantic coast between Maine and the Yucatan Peninsula. These hills, also called the Atlantic Highlands, were the first land European sailors saw when approaching New York Harbor. The highlands are made of sediments laid down when dinosaurs walked the earth, compressed and cemented into rock, then lifted high above sea level. Twin Lights Lighthouse sits atop these heights, its beacons once visible for 70 miles out to sea. The elevation creates dramatic temperature differences. It can be snowing on top while rain falls at sea level just below. The view from the highlands encompasses the entire New York Harbor, Raritan Bay, and on clear days, the Manhattan skyline floating like a mirage on the horizon. Lake Mohawk in Sparta is completely artificial, created in 1926 by building a dam and boardwalk across a swamp, yet now appears completely natural. The lake's creators sculpted the shoreline to create coves and points, planted trees to frame views, and built a boardwalk that makes the lake feel like a mountain resort. Within a decade, nature had claimed the lake as its own. Fish populations established themselves, migrating birds began stopping over, and aquatic plants colonized the shallows. The boardwalk stretches nearly half a mile across the water, one of the longest in New Jersey, creating the unusual situation of driving across the middle of the lake. In winter, the lake becomes a skating rink, residents clearing sections of ice for hockey games that continue a tradition started the first winter after the lake filled. The Shark River is not actually a river, but a tidal inlet that extends 7 miles inland, named for sharks that once swam far upstream to feed. Sand tigers and smooth dogfish still enter the inlet in summer, following baitfish into increasingly narrow waters. The river is really a drowned valley, flooded when sea levels rose after the last ice age. At low tide, mud flats appear where fiddler crabs emerge in armies, their clicking claws creating a sound like radio static. The inlet divides into multiple branches that reach far inland, creating a maze of tidal creeks bordered by salt marsh. Houses along the Shark River wake to different views twice daily, the tide transforming broad water into mud flats, then back to water again. Swartzwood Lake in Sussex County formed in a glacial depression so perfectly aligned that it points directly at the North Star. This alignment is pure coincidence, but it made the lake useful for navigation by Native Americans and early settlers. The lake fills a valley scoured by ice moving exactly north-south, following weaknesses in the bedrock that happen to align with Earth's axis. In winter, ice fishermen use the lake's orientation to navigate in snowstorms, knowing that the long axis always points north. The lake stratifies in summer, with warm water floating over cold, creating distinct layers that don't mix until autumn winds stir them together. Springs feed the lake from below, bubbling up through the glacial till, their locations marked by circles of open water that remain unfrozen even in the coldest winters. The Rancocas Creek drainage system branches like a tree with 5 major tributaries, draining nearly 360 square miles of Burlington County. The creek system resembles a botanical drawing, with the main stem dividing into the North Branch and South Branch, which further divide into smaller and smaller tributaries. This dendritic pattern developed over millions of years as water found the easiest paths to the Delaware River. Each branch has its own character, some flowing through pine forests, others through farmland, some tidal, others purely freshwater. The Native American name, Rancocas, means where the land slopes, describing how the creek gathers water from the gradually tilting coastal plain. Where the branches merge, the mixing waters create eddies and backflows that trap sediment, building islands that appear and disappear with the floods. Poxono Island in the Delaware River near Milford is actually Pennsylvania territory, completely surrounded by New Jersey water, a geographic oddity from colonial boundaries. The island belongs to Pennsylvania, but you can only reach it by boat from New Jersey, creating jurisdictional puzzles that have persisted for centuries. The Delaware River's main channel runs to the west of the island, but New Jersey controls the river to the low water mark on the Pennsylvania side, meaning the water around the island is New Jersey, while the land is Pennsylvania. Herons nest in the island's trees, perhaps the only Pennsylvania residents who commute through New Jersey airspace to feed in. Pennsylvania waters. The island floods regularly, disappearing under high water, then re-emerging with each recession like a geographic magic trick. The Pequannock watershed supplies water to Newark from 35 miles away, flowing through a series of reservoirs that hold 14 billion gallons. This water begins as rain on the highlands, filtering through forest soil into streams that feed the reservoirs. The water takes weeks to travel from raindrop to faucet, passing through multiple reservoirs that serve as settling basins, each one cleaner than the last. The watershed is so carefully protected that some areas have been closed to the public for over a century, creating accidental wilderness preserves. Old growth trees survive here that were already mature when the reservoirs were built. The water flows through tunnels bored through solid rock, following a route engineered in the 1890s that still functions perfectly today. Monksville Reservoir flooded an entire valley in 1985, submerging roads, foundations, and cemeteries that are still visible when water levels drop. The reservoir was built for flood control and water supply, but it drowned a community that had existed for 2 centuries. Old Route 511 disappears into the water at both ends of the reservoir, the road continuing underwater across the flooded valley. During droughts, stone walls emerge from the receding water, marking fields that farmers cleared by hand centuries ago. Gravestones stand in the shallows, monuments to families whose homes now lie beneath 40 feet of water. Fish swim through what were once living rooms, and scuba divers explore streets that once echoed with wagon wheels and footsteps. The Atlantic Flyway funnels millions of birds through Cape May each fall, where the peninsula acts as a funnel, concentrating one of Earth's great migrations. Birds following the coastline south find themselves at the tip of Cape May, faced with 13 miles of open water across Delaware Bay. Some species gather here by the thousands, building energy reserves before attempting the crossing. On peak days, the sky fills with wings, hawks kettling in thermal spirals, warblers bouncing through the trees, monarch butterflies drifting like orange snow. The geography that creates this bottleneck has shaped the evolution of migrating species, selecting for those that can successfully navigate this gauntlet. Radar shows the night migrations as great pulses of life moving south, rivers of birds flowing through darkness, guided by stars and magnetic fields toward winter grounds thousands of miles away. Culver's Lake in Sussex County has underground springs that keep water temperatures so stable that ice forms uniformly across the entire surface on the same night. When conditions are exactly right, the entire lake freezes in hours, creating a sheet of black ice so clear you can see the bottom. The springs enter the lake from below, maintaining constant temperatures that prevent the gradual freezing typical of other lakes. Instead, the lake resists freezing until the critical moment, then transforms all at once from liquid to solid. Ice fishermen prize these conditions, as the clear ice allows them to see fish swimming below. The underground springs never freeze, creating areas of thin ice that locals mark with branches, knowing where the Earth's warmth keeps winter at bay. The Passaic River flows in a huge arc, traveling 90 miles to reach a point only 20 miles from its source. This circuitous route exists because the Watchung Mountains block the river's direct path to the sea. The river must flow north, then east, then south, then north again, describing a question mark on the map. This roundabout journey takes the Passaic through multiple geological zones, from hard volcanic rock to soft sedimentary plains. The Great Falls at Patterson exist because the river found a crack in the basalt where it could finally break through the Watchung ridges. The meandering route creates extensive wetlands where the river slows and spreads, including the Great Swamp, Troy Meadows, and Hatfield Swamp. From above, The Passaic's path seems absurd, a river that can't make up its mind, but every bend follows the ancient logic of geology. 7 presidents. Oceanfront Park in Monmouth County is named not for presidents who visited, but for 7 Washington, D.C. street names from the 1800s development. The park preserves one of the last undeveloped stretches of beach in this part of the Jersey Shore, where the Atlantic meets the land as it has for thousands of years. The beach here faces northeast, catching swells from storms that track up the coast. In winter, the sand freezes into a concrete hard surface that rings like metal under footsteps. Seals sometimes haul out here in cold months, traveling south from New England rookeries. The name confusion persists. Visitors often ask which presidents visited, unaware that the name refers to streets named Grant, Lincoln, and Garfield, among others, in a Victorian-era development scheme that never materialized. The Cedar Swamp Creek flows so slowly through the pine barrens that a leaf dropped in the water takes 3 months to travel 5 miles. This languid pace exists because the land here is almost perfectly flat, dropping less than a foot per mile. The creek barely seems to move at all, more like a long, narrow lake than a flowing stream. Cedar roots extend into the water, releasing tannins that turn it the color of root beer, dark but perfectly clear. Time moves differently along Cedar Swamp Creek. Seasons change while the same water lingers in pools. Dragonflies complete their entire life cycle in water that has barely traveled a mile. Paddling here requires patience, as the current provides almost no assistance. The creek winds through Atlantic white cedar swamps, where trees grow straight as telephone poles from tea-colored water. In some stretches, the creek spreads into sheets of water, so thin they barely cover the sand, yet somehow fish navigate these liquid films, following channels invisible to human eyes. Kittatinny Valley limestone in Sussex County contains caves that breathe, exhaling cool air in summer and warm air in winter through countless hidden passages. These breathing caves act like giant natural air conditioners, as temperature differences between the cave air and outside air create pressure differentials that force air through the passages. Stand near certain cliff faces on a hot summer day, and you can feel the mountain exhaling 50-degree air from invisible cracks. In winter, these same openings steam like volcanic vents, the Earth's warmth escaping into frigid air. The limestone here is riddled with solution caves, dissolved by slightly acidic rainwater over millions of years. Some caves connect through miles of passages too small for humans, but perfect for air and water. Bats navigate these hidden highways, disappearing into cracks barely wide enough for a hand, emerging miles away from different openings. The Shrewsbury River is actually 2 rivers, the Navesink and Swimming River, that merge and split multiple times, creating a liquid maze. Maps struggle to represent this confusion of water, where rivers become one, then divide, then merge again like aquatic braiding. The system creates islands that are sometimes islands and sometimes peninsulas, depending on tide and season. Early settlers gave up trying to name all the channels, simply calling the whole system the Shrewsbury after the English town. Fish use this watery labyrinth to their advantage, escaping predators by darting from one channel to another. The rivers can flow in different directions simultaneously, one ebbing while the other floods, creating places where currents meet head-on in swirling confusion. Kayakers can paddle in circles here, following what seems like the same river, only to emerge where they started, having traveled through different channels that loop back on themselves. Apple Pie Hill, at 209 feet, is the highest point in the Pine Barrens, from which you can see Atlantic City and Philadelphia on clear days, despite the low elevation. The hill rises from a sea of pine that extends to every horizon, a gentle bump in an otherwise flat landscape. A fire tower once stood here, and its concrete footings remain, slowly being reclaimed by lichens and moss. The name comes from a colonial era, when travelers would stop here to eat apple pies while resting their horses. The elevation, modest anywhere else, is dramatic in the Pine Barrens context, enough to change the vegetation and create different microclimates on north and south faces. From the top, the Pine Barrens look like an ocean of green in summer, russet in fall, and gray-green in winter, an unchanging forest that has looked essentially the same for thousands of years. The Rahway River travels through the most industrialized corridor in New Jersey, yet supports a restored population of herring that swim upstream from Raritan Bay. These fish navigate past chemical plants and under highways, following spawning instincts older than industry. The river has been channelized, polluted, and ignored, yet it persists, slowly healing from decades of abuse. Storm drains feed it urban runoff, but also rainwater that dilutes contamination. In certain stretches, the river runs between concrete walls like a prisoner, but in parks and forgotten corners, it still meanders naturally. Trees leaning over pools where fish gather. The herring that return each spring are descendants of fish that swam here when the Lenape fished these waters. Their persistence through the worst of industrial pollution gives hope that even the most damaged waters can recover. Wawayanda Mountain's name means winding water in Lenape, referring to streams that seem to flow uphill due to optical illusions from the terrain. The mountain creates a landscape of visual tricks where water appears to defy gravity, running up slopes that are actually imperceptible downgrades. These illusions confused early surveyors who couldn't understand their instruments' readings. The streams here follow such gradual gradients and make such sweeping curves that the eye cannot detect the true direction of flow. In morning mist, the effect becomes even more pronounced, with fog flowing in ways that seem impossible, pooling in high places while valleys remain clear. The mountain itself is a massive dome of ancient gneiss pushed up through younger rocks like a bubble of deep earth. Ravens nest in the crags, their calls echoing off cliff faces in ways that make single birds sound like flocks. The Great Egg Harbor River is actually longer than the Maurice River at 59 miles, but crosses the state line, disqualifying it as New Jersey's longest. The river begins in Berlin and flows southeast through the Pine Barrens, its watershed covering nearly 400 square miles. Despite its length, the river is intimate, often narrow enough to jump across, winding through cedar swamps and pine forests in loops so extreme that paddlers sometimes find themselves heading north to go south. The water runs clear and dark, stained by tannins but pure enough to drink if needed. The river's name comes from Dutch sailors who gathered gull eggs from the marshes near its mouth. Today, the river is a national scenic and recreational river, protected but not famous, known mainly to kayakers who spend days following its meandering course through some of New Jersey's last wilderness. Schooley's Mountain rises to 1,073 feet and creates its own weather patterns, receiving 10 inches more precipitation annually than valleys 2 miles away. The mountain acts like a wall to weather systems, forcing moist air upward where it cools and drops its water. This orographic effect creates a lush environment on the mountain while nearby valleys remain relatively dry. Snow falls earlier and stays later on Schooley's Mountain, sometimes holding winter for weeks after spring has arrived below. The extra precipitation supports trees more typical of mountains farther north: sugar maples, yellow birches, and hemlocks that struggle in the drier lowlands. Clouds often cap the mountain, while sunshine fills the valleys, creating an island of mist in clear skies. The old resort hotels that once crowned the mountain took advantage of the cooler temperatures, advertising relief from summer heat to city dwellers. The Sourland Mountain Ridge is composed of diabase rock so hard that it deflected the Wisconsin Glacier around it, creating the current course of the Raritan River. This ancient rock, formed from magma that cooled slowly underground, proved harder than the ice that buried everything around it. The glacier split like water around a stone, flowing to either side of the Sourlands, while leaving the ridge relatively untouched. This deflection forced the Raritan River to find a new course south of the mountains rather than flowing through them. The diabase here rings like a bell when struck with a hammer, a phenomenon called ringing rocks that occurs in only a few places worldwide. The mountain remains wild and undeveloped because the rock is too hard to build on economically. Foundations cost fortunes to excavate. Wells must be drilled hundreds of feet through solid stone. Union Lake near Millville is the largest man-made lake in South Jersey at 898 acres, created by damming a creek in 1869 to power glass factories. The lake filled slowly, drowning forests whose stumps still pierce the surface in dry years. The glass factories needed consistent water power, and the lake provided it, turning wheels that powered furnaces producing everything from window glass to medicine bottles. When the factories closed, the lake remained, by then supporting its own ecosystem of fish, birds, and aquatic plants. Islands in the lake were hills before the flooding, now hosting heron rookeries in trees that sprouted after the water rose. The lake stratifies in summer, creating layers of different temperatures where fish segregate by species, each finding their preferred thermal zone. The Pequest River flows through limestone valleys that maintain constant 54-degree temperatures, supporting the state's only native trout reproduction. The limestone acts as a natural refrigeration system, with spring water emerging from underground at steady temperatures regardless of season. This creates perfect conditions for brook trout, who need cold, clean water to spawn successfully. The river flows past old lime kilns, where limestone was burned to make mortar for Philadelphia's buildings. Rainbow trout now swim where limestone boats once loaded, the industrial past yielding to natural recovery. In summer, when other streams warm to lethal temperatures for trout, the Pequest remains cold, its limestone-cooled waters providing refuge. Watercress grows wild in the springs, brought by German immigrants who cultivated it for salads, now naturalized and thriving in the calcium-rich water. Buttermilk Falls in the Delaware Water Gap drops 200 feet, but sometimes reverses direction, blown back up the cliff face by powerful wind currents. This phenomenon occurs when strong winds funnel through the gap, creating updrafts powerful enough to turn the falling water into ascending mist. On these days, hikers approaching from below get soaked by water falling upward, a reversal of natural order that seems like magic. The falls run strongest in spring when snowmelt swells the creek, but by late summer, often reduce to a trickle or dry completely. The name comes from the white foam the falling water creates, churning like buttermilk in the pool below. In winter, the falls become a palace of ice, with climbers ascending frozen waterfalls that in summer are liquid vertical rivers. The Manasquan River marks the geological boundary between two distinct soil types, with sandy coastal plain to the south and rocky Piedmont to the north. This invisible line runs across New Jersey like a geological equator, dividing the state into two different worlds. South of the river, you can dig for miles without hitting rock, just sand laid down by ancient seas. North of it, bedrock lurks just beneath the surface, the bones of old mountains barely hidden by soil. This boundary affects everything: what plants grow, how water flows, where people build. The Manasquan itself seems aware of the boundary it marks, changing character as it crosses from one geological province to another, running faster over rocky bottoms upstream, slower through sandy channels near the coast. Lake Marcia, atop Mount Tammany, sits at 1,570 feet elevation, fed only by springs and rain. With water so clear, you can see bottom at 20 feet deep. This mountain lake formed in a depression in the sandstone, possibly enlarged by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s. The lake has no visible inlet or outlet, filling from springs that seep through the sandstone and emptying through underground channels. The water remains surprisingly warm in summer, heated by the sun-warmed rock that surrounds it. In autumn, the lake becomes a mirror for the surrounding forest, doubling the world in its still surface. Hikers who reach the lake after climbing Mount Tammany often can't resist swimming, despite regulations against it, drawn by water that seems impossibly blue at such an elevation. The Wickechokie Creek's name means place of the big oaks and flows through a valley where trees from the 1700s still stand along its banks. These ancient oaks have watched the creek for centuries, their roots drinking from the same water that nourished them when America was still 13 colonies. The creek itself is modest, rarely more than 20 feet wide, but it has carved a valley of exceptional beauty through the red shale of Hunterdon County. Covered bridges once spanned the creek at regular intervals, and one still survives, its wooden timbers dark with age. The water runs clear over red stone, creating pools of surprising depth where smallmouth bass hide in shadows. In spring, wild trout lilies carpet the forest floor along the creek, their yellow flowers following the water's course like nature's way of highlighting the stream. Parvin State Park contains a lake that changes color seasonally, from blue to green to brown, based on algae cycles dating back to pre-colonial times. This natural phenomenon follows patterns established long before the dam that created the current lake. In spring, the water runs blue and clear as winter algae die off. By midsummer, green algae bloom, turning the lake the color of pea soup. In fall, different species take over, staining the water brown like tea. Each color phase supports different fish species feeding patterns. Base hunt by sight in clear water, by vibration in murky. The lake remembers rhythms older than human memory, following cycles that began when this was a natural pond in the colonial forest. Scientists studying core samples from the lake bottom can read these color changes going back centuries, preserved in layers of sediment. The flat brook flows through limestone that creates natural swimming holes with underwater caves, some extending hundreds of feet into the bedrock. These pools form where the creek encounters softer limestone layers, swirling currents carving bowls in the stone over millennia. The caves begin as small solution holes where slightly acidic water dissolves the limestone, gradually enlarging until they become caverns that extend far under the banks. Trout shelter in these underwater caves during summer heat, finding cold water that seeps from springs deep in the limestone. Local swimmers know which pools have caves, diving down to feel the cold currents that emerge from darkness. Some caves connect to air-filled chambers inside the banks, places where the water table drops below the cave floor, creating hidden rooms accessible only to those brave enough to swim through flooded passages. Mount Laurel forms a 20-mile-long ridge through Burlington County that's only 200 feet high, but was an island when sea levels were higher. This subtle ridge is composed of green sand marl, full of fossils from when this was ocean floor. Dig anywhere along the ridge, and you'll find shells, shark teeth, and sometimes bones of mosasaurs, the giant marine reptiles that ruled Cretaceous seas. The elevation difference is barely noticeable while driving, just a gentle rise from the surrounding plain. But it was enough to keep this strip of land above water during higher sea levels. The ridge affects drainage patterns throughout the region, dividing waters that flow northwest to the Delaware from those flowing southeast to the Atlantic. Housing developments now cover much of the ridge, but in remaining forests, you can still find fossils weathering out of the marl, ancient sea creatures in soil, 200 feet above modern sea level. The South River in Middlesex County flows backward during high tides, reversing direction twice daily and confusing early settlers who thought it was two different rivers. This tidal reversal extends miles inland, saltwater pushing against fresh in a moving boundary that migrates with the moon's pull. Fish have learned to ride these reversing currents, swimming upstream on incoming tides without effort, then holding in eddies when the flow reverses. The river changes personality completely between tides, murky and brackish when salt water dominates, clearer and fresh when the tide ebbs. Bridges over the South River offer views of this twice-daily reversal, water flowing confidently one direction, then slowing, stopping, and beginning to flow the opposite way as if the earth suddenly tilted. Native Americans timed their travels to these reversals, paddling with the incoming tide upstream, then returning with the ebb. Terrace Pond on Barefoot Mountain sits in solid rock at 1,380 feet elevation with no inlet or outlet streams, filled only by precipitation and underground seeps. The pond occupies a depression in the bedrock, possibly gouged by glaciers or formed by the weathering of softer rock layers. The water level rises and falls dramatically with rainfall, sometimes dropping so low that you can walk across the exposed bedrock bottom. After heavy rains, the pond can be 6 feet deep, clear mountain water reflecting the surrounding cliffs. The lack of flowing water means the pond develops distinct layers in summer, warm on top and startlingly cold below. Ice forms earlier here than on lakes 1,000 feet lower, the elevation and exposure to wind stealing heat from the water. The pond sits on resistant conglomerate rock, puddle and stone that has existed since the glaciers retreated, a piece of sky captured in the mountain. The Elizabeth River is only 13 miles long but drains one of the most densely populated watersheds in the world, with over 500,000 people per square mile. This small river carries the runoff from a landscape of concrete and asphalt, yet somehow maintains its ancient course to Newark Bay. Storm drains feed it from every direction, turning the river into a pulse that rises and falls with each rain. Despite the urban density, herons still fish in the Elizabeth River, standing in water that reflects oil rainbows and shopping cart shadows. The river predates the city by millions of years, and beneath the channelized sections, the original meandering course still tries to assert itself, flooding in patterns that follow pre-colonial curves. Fish have returned to stretches once considered dead, life finding ways to persist in water that runs past factories and under highways. The river mouth opens to Newark Bay through marshlands that still turn gold in autumn. Spartina grass, waving where the Lenape once gathered shellfish. Wading River in the Pine Barrens maintains a constant temperature year-round due to groundwater springs, never freezing even in severe winters. The springs bubble up through white sand, carrying water that's been underground for decades, insulated from seasons. This thermal stability creates a refuge for fish and aquatic insects that would otherwise perish in winter cold or summer heat. The river runs through pygmy pine forests where trees decades old stand only 6 feet tall, stunted by the sterile sand. Cedar waxwings gather here in winter to feed on hollyberries, their soft calls mixing with the constant murmur of flowing water. The tea-colored water is so pure, you can see individual sand grains rolling along the bottom, pushed by currents too gentle to feel. In the deepest pools, the water takes on the color of dark amber, like looking through ancient glass. Native Americans called this the river that never sleeps, recognizing its constant flow through all seasons. The Jenny Jump Mountain Ridge got its name from a colonial legend, but rises so abruptly from the valley that it creates its own wind patterns and microclimates. The mountain jumps up from flat farmland, a wall of ancient gneiss that forces weather up and over its spine. This abrupt rise creates updrafts that hawks and vultures ride without flapping, circling on invisible elevators of air. The legend tells of a girl named Jenny who jumped to escape pursuing enemies, but the Lenape name simply meant straight up, describing the mountain's dramatic profile. Different plants grow on the north and south faces, sometimes separated by only a few dozen feet, but living in different worlds of temperature and moisture. The mountain catches storms that miss the valleys, wringing water from clouds that would otherwise pass by. Ghost Lake sits in a depression on the mountain, appearing and disappearing with rainfall, as if the mountain itself is playing tricks. Silver Bay on Barnegat Bay is perfectly circular, carved by a meteorite impact that scientists estimate occurred 35,000 years ago. The bay forms an almost perfect circle a quarter-mile across, its edges still showing the raised rim of the impact crater despite millennia of erosion. The meteorite itself has never been found, likely vaporized on impact or buried deep beneath bay mud. Fish gather in unusual numbers here, perhaps drawn by magnetic anomalies in the rocks melted and reformed by cosmic impact. The circular shape affects tidal flow, creating a gentle whirlpool effect during tide changes. Local legends spoke of this as a sacred place long before scientists recognized its extraterrestrial origin. Osprey nest on platforms around the bay's edge, their high perches offering views of this ancient scar where space touched Earth. On calm mornings, the perfect circle of water reflects the sky like a lens focused on infinity. The Black River in Morris County flows through a gorge with 200-foot walls carved through solid rock over millions of years. The river follows ancient fault lines, finding weaknesses in stone that water could exploit over geological time. Hemlocks lean from the gorge walls at impossible angles, their roots gripping cracks in rock, their shade keeping the gorge cool even in summer heat. The water has carved potholes in the bedrock, some large enough to swim in, perfect cylinders drilled by swirling stones. In spring floods, the river becomes a different creature, rising 30 feet up the gorge walls, leaving debris and tree branches that seem impossibly high during summer's gentle flow. The black rock that gives the river its name is actually dark gray schist that appears black when wet. Ravens nest in the cliff faces, their calls echoing between the walls in ways that make the gorge seem even deeper than it is. Ocean City sits on an island that didn't exist until 1750, formed when a storm cut a new inlet through the barrier beach, creating the modern coastline. Before that night of wind and waves, this was part of a continuous barrier island stretching for miles. The storm surge found a weak spot and punched through, dividing one island into two and changing the geography permanently. The city built on this accidental island now seems as permanent as bedrock, but old maps show a completely different coastline. The inlet that created the island has migrated north and south over the centuries, sometimes threatening to close, sometimes widening to consume whole blocks. Houses built on solid ground now stand in water, the island's edges constantly renegotiated by currents and storms. Every nor'easter reshapes the island slightly, adding sand here, stealing it there, the island breathing with the seasons. The Saddle River travels 30 miles entirely through suburban development, yet maintains water quality high enough to support native brook trout. This small miracle flows through some of the most expensive real estate in America, past mansions and shopping centers, yet remains clean enough for the most sensitive fish species. The river's salvation lies in its protected riparian buffers, strips of forest preserved along its banks that filter runoff and shade the water. Ancient sycamores lean over pools where trout rise to mayflies in the evening, scenes that seem impossible so close to Manhattan. The river's name comes from its saddle-shaped valley, though development has obscured this original topography. In autumn, leaves from preserved forest strips turn the river into a conveyor of color, red and gold leaves spiraling in eddies, collecting in pools that look like nature's stained glass. Crater Lake in Pike County formed when an underground coal fire caused the surface to collapse, creating a perfectly round lake 100 feet deep. The coal seam burned for years, consuming itself until the supporting rock crumbled, the surface falling into the void. Water filled the crater, creating a lake so geometrically perfect it seems artificial. The water stays unusually warm, heated perhaps by coal still smoldering far below. No streams feed the lake, and none drain it. Water enters as rain and groundwater, leaves through evaporation and underground seepage. Fish introduced decades ago have evolved in isolation, developing subtle differences from their parent populations. The lake's walls drop nearly vertically, the water going from ankle deep to over your head in a single step. Local stories tell of the lake being bottomless, though sonar reveals the flooded mine workings below. The Arthur Kill between New Jersey and Staten Island is not a river, but a tidal strait, with water flowing north on one tide and south on the next. This confusion of water has confounded navigators for centuries, appearing to be a river that can't decide which way to flow. The Kill is actually a drowned valley from when sea levels were lower, now serving as a connection between Newark Bay and Raritan Bay. Ships must time their passages with the tides or fight currents that can exceed 5 knots. The name comes from the Dutch, with kill meaning channel, though English speakers often assume it refers to something more sinister. Great blue herons fish the shallows where industrial waterfronts give way to surprising pockets of marsh. The strait remembers its past as a river valley. Freshwater springs still bubble up through the salt, creating pockets of brackish water where unusual combinations of plants grow. Mount Mitchell in the Watchungs preserves a grove of 400-year-old hemlocks that survived because the terrain was too steep to log in the 1800s. These ancient trees grow from a slope so precipitous that loggers couldn't safely fell them or remove the timber. Now they stand as a glimpse of the original forest, their dark canopy creating a perpetual twilight below. The hemlocks predate European settlement, silent witnesses to 4 centuries of change in the valley below. Some trunks measure 6 feet in diameter, their bark deeply furrowed by centuries of growth. The grove maintains its own climate, degrees cooler in summer, warmer in winter, the dense evergreen canopy moderating extremes. Barred owls nest in the largest trees, their calls echoing through the grove at dusk. The forest floor beneath the hemlocks is almost bare, the thick canopy allowing too little light for undergrowth, creating a cathedral-like space between the massive trunks. The Batstow River in the Pine Barrens is so pure that it contains almost no dissolved minerals, making it nearly as clean as distilled water. This purity comes from the river's path through sterile sand that contributes almost nothing to the water chemistry. The lack of minerals means the water conducts electricity poorly, a river that wouldn't register on many water quality meters. Despite this chemical purity, the water runs brown from tannins, pure but colored like tea. Fish in the Batstow have adapted to this mineral-poor environment, extracting what little nutrition the water offers. The river moves slowly through white sand and cedar swamps, taking days to travel distances that mountain streams cover in hours. Bog iron deposits form where the river encounters iron-rich groundwater, orange rust precipitating out like nature's chemistry experiment. Pine Barrens tree frogs call from the cedars, their chorus rising and falling with the humidity. Hook Mountain extends into the Hudson River, creating currents so complex that sailing ships had to wait for specific tides to navigate past safely. The mountain forces the river to bend sharply, creating back eddies and whirlpools that could trap sailing vessels for hours. Ships would anchor in Haverstraw Bay, waiting for the tide that would carry them past this navigational nightmare. The currents here still confound modern boaters, with water flowing upstream on one side while racing downstream on the other. The mountain itself is part of the Palisades, the same diabase rock that walls the Hudson for miles. Peregrine falcons nest on the cliffs, diving at speeds that let them overtake the swifts and swallows that feed over the river. From the mountain summit, you can watch the tide change, the river's surface texture shifting as billions of gallons reverse direction. Lake Nummi in Cape May County was created by beavers 300 years ago and maintained by humans when beavers disappeared, preserving a colonial-era ecosystem. The original beaver dam has been replaced by an earthen structure, but the lake maintains the same level the beavers established. Cypress trees grow in the shallows, their knees protruding from water stained dark by their own bark. This is the northernmost natural stand of bald cypress on the Atlantic coast, trees more typical of southern swamps thriving in New Jersey. Wood ducks nest in the cypress hollows, their ducklings dropping into the water from heights that seem impossibly dangerous. The lake preserves a landscape from when beavers shaped much of North America's hydrology, before they were trapped to near extinction for their pelts. Muskrats now maintain lodges where beavers once lived, smaller engineers continuing the work of shaping wetlands. The Lockatong Formation under Mercer County contains dinosaur footprints preserved in mud that hardened 200 million years ago when New Jersey was a tropical rift valley. These tracks record moments from the Triassic period when the supercontinent Pangaea was breaking apart. The footprints show where dinosaurs walked along lake shores that no longer exist, their weight pressing into mud that would become stone. Some trackways extend for dozens of yards, showing the gait and speed of animals that vanished millions of years ago. The rock formation also preserves ripple marks from ancient waves, raindrop impressions from Triassic storms, and mud cracks from droughts older than the Atlantic Ocean. Finding these traces requires knowing where to look. Road cuts and quarries where the rock layers are exposed, revealing pages from Earth's deep history. Oradell Reservoir's dam created a lake so large it submerged entire communities in 1922, with stone walls and foundations still visible during droughts. The reservoir covers 768 acres, hiding the remains of farms and homes that stood here for centuries. When water levels drop, stone walls emerge like archaeological ruins, marking field boundaries drawn by farmers whose names are forgotten. Foundations of houses appear, their cellars now nurseries for fish, their hearths cold under fathoms of water. Old roads become visible as straight lines through the lake bed, routes that connected communities now dissolved. Trees that were saplings when the water rose are now submarine forests, their branches reaching up toward boats passing overhead. The reservoir provides drinking water for nearly 1 million people, who rarely think about the communities sacrificed for their faucets. The Assunpink Creek's name means rocky place in Lenape, describing a stream that crosses 3 distinct geological formations in its 30-mile journey. The creek begins in the sandy coastal plain, flows through the rocky Piedmont, and ends in the tidal waters near Trenton. Each geological zone changes the creek's character, meandering through sand, tumbling over rocks, then slowing in tidal marshes. The rocks that give the creek its name are visible in Assunpink Park, where the water has carved channels through ancient stone. Washington's army crossed the Assunpink during the Revolution, the rocky bottom providing firm footing for horses and cannon. The creek maintains its Lenape name, one of many waterways that preserve the language of people who knew every rock and riffle. In spring, shad and herring still attempt to run up the creek, though dams now block their ancient routes. Hamburg Mountain contains magnetic ore deposits so rich that lightning strikes it more frequently than surrounding peaks of the same height. The magnetite in the mountain acts like a lightning rod, attracting electrical discharge from storms. Trees on the summit show lightning scars, spiraling burns that mark where electricity found ground through living wood. Compasses become unreliable here, needles swinging wildly as they detect the mountain's magnetic field rather than Earth's poles. The ore that causes this phenomenon was mined for centuries, providing iron for the early republic. Mine shafts penetrate deep into the mountain, following veins of magnetite that gleam black in lantern light. Some shafts have flooded, creating underground lakes of incredible blue, the color coming from minerals dissolved from the ore. The mountain generates its own weather, its magnetic field possibly affecting storm development, though scientists debate this connection. The Metadeconk River flows in 2 directions from its source, with the north branch reaching Barnegat Bay and the south branch flowing to the Atlantic. This unusual bifurcation happens because the river originates in a broad, flat area where water can choose either path depending on subtle differences in rainfall and ground saturation. The 2 branches create a hydrological oddity. Water falling as rain in one spot can reach the ocean through 2 completely different routes. The north branch meanders through pine forests and cedar swamps, taking a leisurely route to the bay. The south branch runs more directly east, crossing under the Garden State Parkway to reach the ocean near Manasquan Inlet. Native Americans used this double river as a transportation route, portaging between branches to travel from bay to ocean. The name Metadeconk comes from the Lenape, though its meaning is disputed. Some say it means winter watering place. Others claim it refers to the branching nature of the river. Spruce Run Reservoir holds 11 billion gallons, but is only 15 feet deep on average, spreading across 1,290 acres of drowned farmland. During droughts, fence posts emerge from the receding water, marking fields that were worked for generations before the dam was built. Stone walls appear and disappear with the water level, archaeological ruins of a rural past. The reservoir filled in 1963, but the land remembers its former life. Old roads become visible as straight lines of different colored bottom. Hedgerows show as lines of stumps. The shallow water warms quickly in summer, creating algae blooms that turn the water green as pea soup. In winter, the reservoir freezes completely, safe enough for ice fishing across its entire expanse. Wind can turn the shallow water from calm to dangerous in minutes, 3-foot waves developing where the fetch allows wind to build momentum. Fish here grow fat on the rich food web supported by nutrients from the drowned farmland soil. Point Pleasant Canal connects Barnegat Bay to the Manasquan River, allowing boats to travel the entire New Jersey coast, protected from ocean waves. This connection, completed in 1926, fulfilled a dream dating to colonial times, an inland waterway sheltered from Atlantic storms. The canal is only a mile long, but transforms transportation along the coast, letting small boats avoid the dangerous inlets. Current flows through the canal change with the tides, sometimes racing fast enough to challenge boat engines. The canal created new mixing zones for salt and fresh water, new habitats for species that need brackish conditions. Ospreys fish where the canal meets the bay, diving for fish confused by the mixing waters. The canal represents human geography imposing itself on natural geography, a shortcut that nature never created, connecting water bodies that had been separate since the Ice Age ended. And so we've wandered through New Jersey's hidden geography, from ancient mountains to shifting shores, from glacial lakes to pine-barren streams that run the color of tea. We've traced rivers that flow backward with the tides, stood atop ridges that deflected glaciers, and discovered waters so pure they're almost invisible. This small state between two great cities holds epochs in its boundaries, stories written in stone and sand that most who cross its length never pause to read. We've seen how the Watchung Mountains remember their volcanic birth, how the Pine Barrens hold water older than memory, how barrier islands roll over themselves in slow motion surrender to the sea. We've followed the Passaic River in its questioning path, unable to find direct passage to the ocean, forced to wander 90 miles to travel 20. We've stood where 3 watersheds divide, where a single raindrop begins journeys to different seas. New Jersey's geography reminds us that the extraordinary often hides in the overlooked, that wonders don't require wilderness, and that even the most developed landscapes still pulse with the ancient rhythms of rock and water. The state is a palimpsest, each age writing over the last, but never quite erasing what came before. Dinosaur footprints lie beneath suburbs, glacial lakes hide under reservoirs, and Native American names flow on through waters that have forgotten their meaning but remember their sound. Tomorrow, these places will continue their slow transformations, unmeasured and mostly unnoticed, as they have for millions of years. The Pine Barrens will filter rain through sand laid down when the Atlantic was young. The Delaware will keep cutting through the water gap, grain by grain, patient as stone. The tide will reverse the rivers twice daily, as reliable as breathing. Somewhere, sand is moving northward at Sandy Hook, adding new land grain by grain. Somewhere, a spring is bubbling up through limestone, carrying water that fell as rain when forests were unbroken. These movements are too slow for human perception, too patient for our brief lives to fully witness. But they continue nonetheless, the great work of water and wind, ice and time, shaping and reshaping this small corner of the continent. Sleep well, knowing that somewhere in New Jersey, a river is reversing its flow, a mountain is catching clouds, and the Pine Barrens are filtering rainwater through sand laid down when dinosaurs walked the earth. The geography continues its quiet work through the night, as it has for eons, as it will long after we're gone. Good night.